remember running for office and people like, oh, don't say occupation. We had a target on our backs from, the AIPAC lobby since before coming into Congress. I support BDS as a strategy to hold Israel accountable.
Do you see this as a moment where AIPAC is in a position of weakness?
They're in a position of desperation.
Today, we're speaking to Jamaal Bowman, a progressive incumbent in the U.S. House of Representatives who recently lost his primary election to another challenger, Democrat George Latimer. AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobby, poured nearly $15 million alone into the Democratic primary to unseat Bowman, who called Israel's war on Gaza a genocide. This reportedly made it the most expensive House primary in U.S. history. So how does Bowman look back at that loss? And how does he view the role of the pro-Israel lobby in American politics? That's what we're going to chat to him about. And he joins us now from New York City. Congressman Jamaal Bowman, thank you so much for taking the time to come on a Real Talk.
Of course, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
No, of course. Pleasure's all mine, Congressman. I want to start off with a question that I'm sure a lot of people have been asking you. It's been 4 months since the primary and since losing that race. What have you been up to since then?
Resting, licking my wounds, after a tough fight and tough defeat. Getting back into the gym, focused on my health, spending more time with family. And I kind of went underground for a little while and wasn't really communicating with many people, for a couple of months. And then, I started to, plug back into what's been happening, socially, politically, in my community here locally, and starting to have a lot of one-on-one conversations, small group conversations, doing some traveling to different parts of the country, as I transition and prepare to transition to being a free agent, a liberated.
I thought you were gonna drop. I thought you were gonna drop it. I thought the exclusive was coming.
No exclusive, man. To being a liberated, private citizen, excited about all of the opportunities to come. So that's pretty much it, man.
You said licking your wounds. I mean, in retrospect, how are you looking at that experience?
I mean, it was an experience that had to happen. It's an experience I'm very grateful for. When you fight for justice and you fight for humanity, the powers that be are going to come after you. And so that was a righteous fight that I was proud to be a part of. And as you know, it wasn't just me, it was supporters all across the district, all across the country. I mean, if you're in Congress and you can't stand up against genocide, then what are we even doing there, right? And so, yeah, man, it was a fight that needs to happen for me personally, but also for just American politics and the national conversation around, big money in politics, special interests, the Israel lobby more broadly, AIPAC very specifically. So it was a necessary fight and a necessary battle.
We're gonna unpack a lot of that in this coming conversation, but you've been labeled as a politician who's gone through an evolution, right? You spent 2 terms in the House, and it's been said or it's been reported that your views of the world, specifically Israel-Palestine, have kind of evolved during your terms in office. Now, would you agree with that?
I mean, I don't know if I would frame it that way. First of all, I don't refer to myself as a politician. I'm a public servant, an elected official, rooted in community and what the community needs. And so politician, where I come from is a dirty term. There's a lot of corruption connected to that term. So I would not refer to myself as a politician. Secondly, it's like I said on a previous interview, the more I learned, the more outspoken I became. And so in that sense, I guess we can refer to it as an evolution. But, you got to understand, prior to running for office, I was an educator. I was a elementary school principal, high school guidance counselor, dean of students, and elementary school teacher, high school guidance counselor, dean of students, and a middle school principal, right? So 20 years in public education. And the issue of Palestine is not part of the curriculum and doesn't really come up ever, right, in that space. And so once I decided to run for office, that's when I started to dive into the issue and learn much more about it, mainly because I was running against Elliot Engel, who was the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee and, the number one pro-Hawk Zionist in Washington for many years. And then there was another candidate in the race, Andum Ghebreigorous, who was an expert in foreign policy. And so I needed to, step up my game and learn as much about foreign policy in general, but particularly that issue in this district, because this is a district with a high Jewish population and more specifically a high Zionist population. And so, at that time, as I learned about it, first of all, immediately you see the injustice, immediately you see the inhumanity, right? Like just in terms of when you read about it. So I would read about it, I would talk to others about it, learn as much about it as I could on the ground here from afar. And during that first race, it was, they give you the talking points, right? The talking points are basically, we want to end the occupation and a two-state solution, right? That was kind of the general progressive
When you say
talk.
they give you who gives you the talking points? What do
Yeah,
you mean
like
by
so,
that?
like Democratic consultants, comms apparatuses and individuals, right? Like, okay, this is how you talk about this issue, right?
Mhm.
So the people around me, that's how we talked about the issue. It was like, you say two-state solution, that's the safe space. It makes everyone happy. And so, I remember uh, I went to someone who I knew. It wasn't a friend, but like an acquaintance, someone who was, happened to be Jewish, lived in the district, and he had like an event at his house with where they were supporting someone's new small business. And the issue came up, the issue of Israel-Palestine came up. And, he said the same thing I heard before, we support a two-state solution. But then he says something, but we don't support right of return. I was like, wait a minute. Like, I didn't know what right of return was at that time, but I knew that the Palestinians were driven from their homes. And him saying you don't support the right of return, I'm like, wait a minute. You don't support them coming back to their homes, is what I was thinking.
Right.
So I was like, okay. So it was like as I got more into my first race, as I gotten into Congress, as I began to learn more, and of course, after visiting, you learn more and you say more, speak out more because it's inhumane and unjust. So
Mm.
yeah, so if you want to call that an evolution, I guess we can call it that, but it was more coming from not knowing to knowing. And then when I got to knowing, I started to be more outspoken.
Well, I think the term evolution it stems from perhaps the fact that your positions have gradually changed over your time in office as well. I think, and you've addressed this before. A lot of people talk about how you in 21 basically voted for the funding of the Iron Dome, and I don't know if how you look back at that, taking a step like that, if it was just, you kind of trying to, that term PEP, progressive except for Palestine. So maybe you were trying to balance it out, kind of hold the stick
No,
from the middle, or no,
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 no, no.
you're shaking
I
your head.
don't.
Okay.
I'm not a politician, man. So I don't approach none of this stuff from the perspective of a politician. I approach it all from the perspective of black man in America and what that means, right? And what that means is clearly understanding and rooted in my ancestral history here. So that's how I approach all of it, right?
Right.
Now, one quick thing about evolution, now I want to talk more about that Iron Dome vote.
Mm.
What evolution implies when I hear it is, oh, I was more pro Israel and then I became more pro Palestine. And that's not true. I was never pro Israel. And I even hesitate to call myself pro-Palestine now. I'm pro-human rights. And so no matter what, we need to fight for the human rights of people, period. And the Palestinian people are experiencing a genocide now, but even before that, they were living in an apartheid state, in an occupation, detaining of children, unjust criminal charges, mowing the lawn. See, stuff like I didn't know all of that then, right? All about mowing the lawn and all of that stuff. Now, in terms of that vote, the Iron Dome
Yes.
vote at that time. So at that time, I would say, well, a couple of things. One, you got to meet the needs of the people in your district and respond to the needs of the people in your district, right? So if my district, has a large Jewish population, of course, I'm going to engage them to learn more about what's important to them and try to govern in alignment with their needs and the needs of the rest of the district. And try my best to do that. Didn't work out that well, but you try your best to do that. But also at that particular moment, I the Iron Dome, as I understood it, in it of itself, is a defense system, right? And sure, I support, Israel's right to defend itself in the same way I support Palestinians' right to defend themselves, right? And so I didn't want a no vote at that time in 2021 to be received as I'm okay with Jews being killed, right? And so that's why that vote took place at that time. Of course, now that vote would be different and has been different because I've had to vote on it, other things for Israel since, which have all been no. So it wasn't a like, I was pro Israel at one time. I've evolved now to be pro something. It wasn't that. It was just, that was my thinking at that time. And again, everything I've learned have helped me to communicate better, communicate more, and be more active and engaged with my advocacy, but also with my votes.
But in regards to that specific vote, is there an incident or something that made you look at it differently? Because you said I understood it that way at that time. So what's changed with regard to that particular vote?
Well, not just with the vote. I mean, everything has changed, right? Like at that time, since that time, I think this happened. Yeah. So I think I went to Israel after this, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah. November 21 is when you went. Yeah.
Yeah. So since that time, I've been to Palestine, right? Like, so I met with Breaking the Silence, former IDF soldiers. I've been to Ramallah. I've been to Hebron. I saw the water tanks on top of homes that need to be preserved. I've talked to kids in middle school in Hebron. I've seen the giant wall around the West Bank. They didn't even let us go to Gaza because of the instability there. I've been stopped at checkpoints. And so, anyway, just that trip alone, changed my perspective. But I think more so than that, early 2020. First of all, the continued violence since then. Early 2023 was the most violent period in the West Bank on record. So that was something else. And then post October 7th, right? And like how the whole conflict was being framed, right? And the false equivalencies that were drawn, how Congress and many other leaders throughout the country only talked about the lives lost in Israel and Jewish life and wasn't even acknowledging Palestinian life. So it was all of that led me to the point where I'm at now, where I'm like, I can't support any of that at all.
Well, let's talk about that trip since you mentioned it. Like we said, November 21, you took a trip to Israel and the occupied West Bank. You met with then the Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, and you got a lot of flack for that because he's someone that who said that there will be no Palestinian state under his watch. That he called for annexation of the West Bank. The trip itself was sponsored by J Street, which is a liberal Zionist organization. And like I said, you got a lot of heat, you got a lot of criticism. put you in a rocky place with the Democratic Socialists of America at that time, because I think it was seen as this trip was some sort of approval of what the Israeli government was doing. But there is an other side to this, basically, and that other side is what you actually saw on that ground and what that trip, the impact of that trip that it left on you. So tell me about that. Tell me about that time.
Yeah, I mean, I just spoke about it for a couple of minutes. I mean, how can I speak with authority about a subject without going through a personal experience connected to that subject? So, again, as a representative for New York's 16th district, still learning about the issue, large Zionist population in my district, I didn't want to just read about it or hear from experts. I wanted to go there and experience it and see it and feel it and engage with the people and engage with the community. So that was my objective. The criticism is what it is. The only thing I'll say about that is, just because one group are experts on an issue or prioritize an issue doesn't mean everybody else is an expert on that issue. So in terms of Naftali Bennett's history and a lot of the other stuff, I came to learn this as I went through these experiences. I wasn't no expert in Naftali Bennett or on the issue, before I got there. And so, that's just the way that was. But going there, looking him in the eye, looking President Herzog in the eye, meeting with members of the Knesset, I immediately felt the complete dismissal of the Palestinian struggle and plight. I can sense and feel, and I heard from them that they didn't care at all. And so I had to go through that to come back and be like, this is crazy. The U.S. needs to step in and do something about this right now. And it wasn't until I think a year or so later where I, penned a letter with Bernie Sanders to Biden to that effect.
And it was only a 5-day trip, right? It was a short trip. It was
a 5-day trip, but it was, the way J Street describes it is, it's a graduate level experience, right? And so you up early, you're out all day, you're meeting with all kinds of people, you're seeing everything, you're going everywhere. And it was very powerful, man. I mean, that's actually, I don't really rock with J Street right now at all. But I still give him credit for that trip because, it wasn't a propaganda trip, no matter how much people may think that on the outside. The fact that they let us engage with former IDF soldiers in Brinket and Silence alone is like, once you hear them talk, it's like, oh, this shit is crazy. So yeah, man, I'm grateful for it. The first day of the trip, I forget the gentleman's name, but he was articulating some of the history, shared his family's history, his personal experience. He was Jewish and a self-identified Zionist. But I never forget the last sentence of what he said to us. And he spoke for a very long time. He was an older gentleman. He said, I can't reconcile my Zionism with the Nakba. And I thought that was really powerful to hear him say that. And I think that sort of conversation is something that's not happening in Congress. It's definitely not happening in mainstream media. It's definitely not happening here on the ground with the Jewish community here. But it was powerful, man, and that conflict I think is important to explore for many going forward.
And you also put out a tweet during that time with a bunch of Palestinian children, and you said this. There are streets that they cannot walk and places they cannot go simply because they're Palestinian. And then you go on to say the occupation must end. So what was that moment like, meeting these kids?
It's very familiar because I've been an educator my whole life. And so, I've worked with children my entire life, and most of my experience in education has been with children from poor, marginalized, historically neglected backgrounds. So they bring a particular trauma to school, and they speak a certain way, they act a certain way, they engage a certain way, but they're still children, right? And so the beautiful thing about children is they are they are filled with incredible hope and aspiration, even though they may be going through something horrific like an occupation. And so that was probably one of my favorite parts of the trip, just to hang out with the kids. And I asked them, what do they want? I asked this question,
Hmm.
and they just said they want to be free, like they want freedom, they want an end to the occupation. This is what the kids were saying. So it was very powerful, man. And it was that engagement that led to me tweeting that out. But that's another thing too, right? Like I remember running for office, and people being like, "Oh, don't say occupation, right? Don't say that. We don't like to use that word." And it's like I've been told not to say occupation. I've been told not to say Nakba. I've been told
This
not to
is
say.
by the Democratic strategists that you
No,
mentioned earlier.
this is by no. This what I'm saying now is by like members of this community, members of the district, constituents.
Right, the
Don't say
16th.
those things. Whether they're Jewish, Zionists, or other. Like, no, you don't say those things, right? And that's the thing. There's so much fear of being attacked, being labeled anti-Semitic, and so many other things where we don't even talk about it. And so that tweet in that moment was like, something that normally doesn't happen. Tweeting from Hebron and the occupation. And so that's why, we had a target on our backs from, the AIPAC lobby since before coming into Congress. I mean, when I was running, I wouldn't even meet with them. I never took a meeting with AIPAC. When
Did
I
they
got,
try to
of
meet with you?
course, and they tried to do it through channels that they knew I would be open to. So one of the things that AIPAC has done, and this is very important for people to know, man, they've been in a very powerful organizing lobby for several decades.
Yeah.
AIPAC and the pro-Israel lobby have been very strategic in supporting, investing in, and engaging certain communities and organizations and people. One of these organizations is the 100 Black Men, right? So 100 Black Men is an organization of Black men in a variety of, you know, uh, industries and backgrounds working together for the interest of the Black community. At this time I was running, their executive director also worked for AIPAC. And so when Homeboy reached out, I'm like, yo, we could talk about 100 Black Men stuff, but like, I don't want to talk about nothing as it relates to AIPAC. And so we met, we had a conversation, and of course, he still gives me AIPAC literature, right? But this is what they do, and this is what they have strategically done, especially as it relates to the Black community. And that's like, those are the chains that people like me and Corey Bush and Ayanna Presley and others are like breaking free of for our own community. Like we cannot rock with that.
I'm gonna get back to that in a sec. But going back to your trip, what moment do you think had the most profound impact on you? I know you mentioned Vadia Hashem at one point in other interviews, but when you look back, what do you think stuck the most from what you saw?
It's hard, man. The whole thing was just powerful and overwhelming. Um, I guess what comes to mind is the Temple Mount, and the Great Wall, and
Mm.
just that area, right? Because like
In Jerusalem.
in Jerusalem. So I'm literally in the birthplace of monotheism, right? Like I'm like in the birthplace. I'm like walking in the place that I read about in the Bible. right? And it's this rigid segregation and this tension that you could cut with a knife that at any moment something can pop off. And I remember earlier that year, I think, and this was another thing that's crazy because like you know, I grew up with a lot of Muslims, right? And so I think it was earlier that year where the Temple Mount was attacked during Ramadan by like Israeli soldiers.
Yeah.
And I know Muslims, like I know what that means to Muslims that that happened and how disrespectful that was. And then I remember, I think right after that, I think Hamas started launching rockets into Israel, and the news was just reporting how Hamas is a terrorist organization, how crazy Hamas is, and blah blah blah, and not even acknowledging like the attack on the Temple Mount during
The
Ramadan
raids on the mosque. Yeah.
and what that means, right? And so that moment, and someone pointed, oh yeah, that's where Jesus was resurrected. I'm like, what? So like that moment was just incredibly, I'm getting goosebumps talking about incredibly powerful and overwhelming. And then hearing all the rules about, Muslims can go here, but Jews can't go here, and that sort of thing. It was just very overwhelming for me and very, very powerful. But just to be in, because how I was raised to understand God and spirituality and religion, I was raised to associate that with the goodness of humanity and being good and righteousness and all positive things. And I was in a place where that wasn't the case. Like it should be a place where we come together in collective humanity for the betterment of each other and ourselves. And it's not that kind of place. And that was very powerful to just kind of feel that and experience that.
But again, Congressman, I mean, why do you think these trips to Israel, to Palestine, you don't have a bigger impact on American politicians or public servants? I know AIPAC sponsors these trips. J Street sponsors these trips. I know they're two separate entities, but there's a lot of these trips that happen, right? That take place, and a lot of American politicians go on them. But it's not really a common story where they come back from these trips with a different perspective, like yourself. If anything, you'll hear stories of them having a more solidified backing of Israel. So why do you think that's the case?
I mean, that was one reason why, I think I was advised and chose not to go with AIPAC, because I think the AIPAC trip is really a propaganda trip. Like it really is, from what I have heard. Like I've heard AIPAC, like when they take members of Congress, they'll take you to Ramallah, but they'll make sure you're armed with like a bulletproof vest when you get out. Like that sort of communication, right? Like it's dangerous here. You better be vested up, right? So I think there's a huge propaganda piece to it. I also think any member of Congress who chooses to go with AIPAC, you already have a particular disposition towards Israel in relationship with Israel, probably that you choose to make the trip with them, right? Um, if the J Street trip is always like the way I experienced, I would like to think that those members are trying to find um, a pathway to peace in an authentic way.
But no one's publicly taken the stances that you've taken.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again,
as in, like, it's not frequent, is what I'm trying to say. It's not like a frequent thing.
This goes back to what I said before. I'm not a politician, right? Like, I didn't serve in the city council or the state house or Congress for very long. I wasn't raised on a particular religion. So I've always been open. This is just personal, right? I've been more open-minded to like study it and read in the Quran and read in the Bible and really trying to understand. I've always been like a pro-peace dude, you know what I mean? Even though one of my favorite scholars is Ahmed Deedat, who happened to be Muslim when I was a young adult, and of course Malcolm X and all of that. So that's just me.
Mhm.
I can't. I can only speak for myself. I don't know about others, but for me, I can't see something that's unjust and not say something. I mean, that's just how I am, right? And I can't. And in Congress, we take these votes, man, all the time. And you clearly see, like, if AIPAC wants us to vote on something, we're going to vote on it, right? And we better vote a certain way. And you see AIPAC manipulating the process and strong arming the process about democracy. And it didn't, I wasn't there that long to get completely tired of that. Like, this is BS. This is not how democracy is supposed to work or function. Why do we give them, why are we always voting on something on Israel? Like, all due respect, Israel's a country in the Middle East. I got kids in Yonkers in the Bronx who are starving. And we're talking more about and voting more on, an apartheid state. So what are we doing? I mean, so for me, I can't be quiet about that. For my colleagues, listen, when we co-sponsored the Betty McCollum bill when I first got into Congress, we got 1,000 phone calls and letters to the office. They were protesting outside my office. We couldn't even do our jobs to serve our constituents. This is how organized they are, and this is what they respond. Was their response. This is the Betty McCollum bill where we were calling for an accounting of how our money is used so that we can make sure it's not used to detain children in the West Bank, right? This is a bill that wasn't going to be marked up in committee, wasn't even going to be voted on. The fact that I co-sponsored it, they lost their shit, the Israel lobby. Around the same time, I wrote a letter to the Israel consulate, or I may have tweeted it. I think it was a letter as well, demanding that they provide vaccines to Palestinians during COVID. We were still in COVID. That led to a follow-up letter calling me down to the Israel consulate so I could meet with them so they can, introduce themselves, build a relationship, but ultimately get me in line, right?
Did you go?
Did
you go to
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
consulate?
I went to the meeting, absolutely. But I think, it's a variety of reasons why the Judeo-Christian, ideology is really prevalent in our political system. So I think it's a variety of reasons, man. I'm really clear on what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to defeat white supremacy and colonialism and liberate our people, both physically and psychologically, but consciously. I was raised on that. That's what I'm about. So that's just what it is. So I'm not going to, especially after learning all I've learned about Israel, that's white supremacy. So
Yeah, that would be my follow-up question, is that how do you see that through the prism of white supremacy? How do you see Israel-Palestine
it's
through
settler
white supremacy?
colonialism. It's settler colonialism, right? Settler colonialism is white supremacy, is what the colonists did here to the indigenous and wiped them out. Is what the colonists did and Europe did when they brought my ancestors over here and enslaved us for 244 years, and then Jim Crow and all of that is white supremacy, man. Like you colonize a land, you say it's what was it? What's the statement? Land for people that are land something, that quote. Where it's like, no, there's people here. They live here, man. Like, what are we talking about? Right? So colonize the land, kick out 700,000. They can't come back, right? And then periodically, we're just going to torment you and terrorize you over the years as we segregate and separate you and deprive you of food and water. Come on, man. That's white supremacy. And these are Europeans doing this more so, like leading this, right? That's white supremacy, man. to me. And so, yeah, and this is not, again, this is not to, the accusation of, oh, that means you're anti-Semitic is stupid. Like, what are we talking about? Of course, I want Jewish people to be safe. I want all people to be safe. But the state of Israel is an apartheid state and now a genocidal state, and that needs to be called out.
When you return back from that trip, your position started to change. You become a lot more vocal on this stance. And at the time, and I'm talking before October 7th, it was enough to have local rabbis pen an open letter saying that you need to stop being anti-Israel. Now, at that point, what did you believe your mandate or your political mandate to be?
Serve the people of my district with a particular focus on the marginalized people in my district. And so my district is like America, man. It's incredible wealth and abject poverty. And if you're white, you are more likely to have great economic, education, health outcomes. And if you're Black or Latino, you're less likely. You're at the bottom of those indicators. So my mandate was equity. My mandate was to make sure I'm doing everything in my power to uplift the people in this district who have been ignored and marginalized by Elliot Engel for 30 years and Nita Lowey for 30 years and, all of that. And so, yeah, I mean, again, there was a target on our back from the pro-Israel lobby since we got in. So I'm not surprised by that letter from rabbis. I mean, there's been a representation also of my relationship with the Jewish community in my district, right? Like many rabbis have said things like, oh, he's never tried to build a relationship with us. Oh, he's never reached out to us or all of that. That's not true at all. Like when I first got in, I can show you my calendar, man. I mean, we were meeting with rabbis, local Jewish groups in the same way we were meeting with everybody else a lot. So yeah, man, I mean, that's, they were, I mean, if you think about it this way, these rabbis had decades without any pushback, without any criticism in this district. And so now they have it. And
you were also the first black person to represent the district.
First person of color ever. First Black man ever. Yep. And so they're getting pushback from someone or someone who represents a community where maybe they didn't think they were getting pushback from. And then also, let me say this. A couple years prior, you have Rashida and Ilhan elected to Congress, first two Muslim women, if I'm not mistaken. Rashida, I think, is the first Palestinian woman.
Yes.
And them two alone broke through many glass ceilings, not just with their election, but with their rhetoric and language as it relates to criticizing Israel. And so it was a whole new conversation happening on a national level, beginning with them. And then now I'm coming in and Corey's coming in, and we're, obviously in support of human rights and justice. So we're speaking out as well. So they obviously panicked, which ultimately led to them spending all the money they spent to get us out.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to get to right now. I mean, after October 7th, you were one of the first to call for a ceasefire. You opposed unconditional military aid to Israel. You voted against a House resolution that conflated anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And then by that point, there was another open letter, right, from the community. And this at that time, or by that point, they were asking George Latimer, who's a local politician, very pro-Israel, to basically run and challenge you. And he's the one that beat you in the primary race. Now, but at that point specifically, last year, did you feel like, okay, like this fight might be too big for you, to be too strong for you?
Nah, what do you mean? What you mean too strong? What are you talking about?
I mean, when you started seeing local leaders from within the community
Yeah.
asking for another person to basically, let's find an alternative. It's never really a good sign when people from within the community are asking for an alternative. I'm just trying to get what you thought at that time.
No, basically. I got you. So with regard to that specifically, there had been rumblings for many months that George Latimer was going to run for Congress against me.
Yeah.
Being recruited and influenced behind the scenes prior to October 7th in doing so. So there was rumblings about that. But I think zooming out from that for a moment, let's go to, October 7th, right?
Mm-hmm.
The attacks happened. Immediately, Netanyahu and Israeli leaders are telling us out loud what they are going to do. They are saying, we're cutting off food, we're cutting off water. Remember what Amalek did to you.
Amalek. Yeah.
Yes. So saying that, to me, they're telling the world we are going to commit a genocide. Because the story of Amalek is a story of genocide and the response to it. Remember what Amalek did to you, right? They were referring to Palestinians as human animals. That's how they would refer to the the indigenous people here, and how they would refer to Africans, to create the conditions and justification for their enslavement and savage destruction as it relates to the indigenous, their genocide. First, they used the language to create the space to then go and kill these people. So immediately, Israeli leaders were saying this. Members of Congress were giving speeches on the House floor. There are no innocent civilians, right? So this was from President Biden to governors to mayors, we stand with Israel, we stand with the Jewish people. Everyone. Completely ignoring prior to October 7th and ignoring the lives that have been lost since then. This was the context. In addition to, and I've told this story multiple times, there are progressive Jewish people and organizations in my district who support me. Voices for Peace, if not
Jews for Jamaal.
Jews for Jamaal was the sort of amalgamated organization. So I'm on a Zoom call with Jews for Jamaal, which is a variety of people. And this was around the time where the Congress, the House, was going to vote on a $14 billion Israeli military package.
Right.
The genocide was off and running at this point. So I told the group there's no way I could support this. So I didn't say it on the call, but they knew I was not going to support this. I had some offline conversations. And one person on the call said, we need you to vote for this bill. We know that it's not the morally right thing to do, but we need you to do the political thing. And so when she said that, I forget who it was, when she said that, I said to myself, like, if I'm not going to be a moral leader in Congress, I don't want to be in Congress. So whatever comes of this, comes of this. Other thing I felt was, if you are okay with the mass murder of women and children in a country that's 50% poverty and all the other stuff that's going on in Gaza, you're okay with me and my kids being killed. That was what I took from that. And so that's what it was, man. So it was going to be what it was going to be, right? Like at that point, it was not a fight that was too big. Like I said in the beginning, it's a fight that needed to happen.
And then when AIPAC jumped in through its super PAC and threw in $15 million, obviously making it the most expensive primary race for the House.
It was more than that, man. It was in the 20s probably.
But again, just throwing that large of a sum, right? and
Yeah.
pummeling you with negative ads.
Not about Israel, by the way. None of the ads were about Israel, which is which is informative because they know it's a losing issue. And so the ads were about how I'm against Biden. Their focus groups showed them that this is a district that really likes Biden. So let's put ads out there that I'm against Biden. That's what they were. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, but it is ultimately about Israel, isn't it? I mean, AIPAC has supported even election deniers in the past.
Yes,
But
well, AIPAC is always about Israel, but the majority of the people in this district don't know that, right? So the people in the district who are Zionists, who are pro-Israel, and other members of the Jewish community, they know that. But the Black and Latino people in the district ain't thinking about AIPAC. They probably never heard of AIPAC before this race. So they're seeing ads that are telling them, oh, Jamaal voted against Biden's infrastructure bill, so he's against Biden. Planting the seed like, okay, I must be for Trump if I'm against Biden. What's good is those ads didn't work at all with Black and Latino people, and we won the Black and Latino vote by a landslide. So that's the good thing. But yeah, it's about AIPAC for those who know who AIPAC is, but the majority of people prior to this election cycle didn't know who they were.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think it was because of AIPAC money and how much they threw in that election that you lost?
Yes, and the redistricting. After we won, they redrew the lines and took 200,000 Black people out of the district. If I still have the entire Bronx, North Bronx, and not just a small part of it, I don't think George Latimer runs. I don't think he's going to beat me with 200,000 additional Black people in the district, a majority Black district. Majority Black for 30 years under Ingle. The minute they get a Black rep, change the lines. Crazy.
I'm going to read you a quote by a Palestinian-American analyst, Yusuf Munayir, who's actually written about this moment, AIPAC spending that much money. So this is a quote. In the immediate short term, it seems like a reflection of power. But anyone who's been following the politics around this issue in the U.S. for years knows this is anything but. Pro-Israel interest groups never had to overtly and heavily interject themselves into electoral politics in such a way previously, precisely because their cause enjoys a great degree of cultural hegemony. Now, do you agree? Do you see this as a moment where AIPAC is in a position of weakness?
They're in a position of desperation. And so, that is why they spent what they spent. That is why they are much more overt with not just my race, but Corey's race and other races. That is why you see the entire pro-Israel lobby sort of mobilizing in force in terms of not just electoral politics, but the doxing of students on college campuses, the bullying of professionals in their workplaces, lawsuits that are completely frivolous. They are, this is all hands on deck, all hands on deck response to quash any resistance to the lobby. And so they've had to be this way because we've been stepping up and being active and doing what we've been doing. And so, but we have to continue, right? We have to continue to strengthen our coalitions, build power, organize year round, which we didn't do in my race. And I think that hurt as well. But we got to organize year round for electoral politics, but also building power within our shared communities and across communities, because we can't defeat AIPAC and we can't defeat white supremacy alone. Arabs can't do it alone. Muslims can't do it alone. The black community can't do it alone. We got to do it together. That's the most important, one of the most important takeaways of this entire race.
But don't you see that there's a flip side to that? I'm talking from their perspective, that this could be, on their part, an effective strategy in constraining Democrats from criticizing Israel. So if you know AIPAC is going to spend 20, 50, $100 million, and not just against you, but against your opponent to basically take you out if you don't toe the line, don't you see that as an effective strategy? Just the thought of it.
I believe in the power of the people, man. When you look across American history, it's always been the power of the people that have moved this country forward. And so elected officials are going to do what they want to do based on their fear of not losing their seats, right? But excuse me, but the civil rights movement wasn't led by elected officials. It was led by community leaders, right? Same with abolition, same with women's rights, the same with LGBTQ right. It's always been people on the outside pushing those on the inside. So yes, they're gonna bully anyone who has any affiliation with me whatsoever and go very aggressively after them. But anyone who leads with moral clarity and courage will come out better on the other side. But most importantly, we need a movement, man. We need a movement. We need, Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, anti-war, civil rights. We need the collective power and energy.
A grassroots movement.
We need a grassroots movement, man. Period. Ceasefire. It's all been there in pieces for short periods of time. We need to bring that all together for sustained power and sustained strategy. And that's it. That's what it's going to take to win.
Just a little side note here, Brett, something I'd like to ask you about. Do you think the politics of race change as well? Because I'm thinking of, Engel's hot mic moment back then. Mm-hmm. And it was a big deal, and it was picked up by almost all of the mainstream media in the U.S. Whereas this time around, Latimer's remarks have been a lot more racially charged. You even accused him of racism. But ultimately, they didn't make a difference in the outcome.
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to losing 200,000 black people from the district, right? And so it's no longer a majority black district. It's still majority minority, but Latino being the largest minority. And the most active voters in the district are white. And most of them, not most of them, but a lot of them, maybe most of them, are Jewish and supporters of Israel. And so the racial dynamics of the district changed. In addition to, I think, the racial dynamics of the country. The country just elected a racist rapist to be a president, right? And so, yeah, man, the redistricting was the big piece as it relates, to that piece of it.
I'm going to talk about some of the criticisms that have been leveled against you, and I'm hoping to kind of get your insights and seeing what you think. Okay. One of which, when one of the last speeches you gave before the race or before voting started, I'm going to curse here, so I'm just saying that as a disclaimer. But you said, we're going to show fucking AIPAC the power of the motherfucking South Bronx. People ask me why I got a foul mouth. What am I supposed to do? You're coming after me, my family, my children. I'm not supposed to fight back. We're going to show them who the fuck we are. Now, for that particular moment, some of your critics came out and said, well, at this point, you knew you were going to lose, so you basically wanted to portray yourself as some sort of political AIPAC martyr.
Whatever, man. Fuck are we talking about? Whatever. I ain't got no comment on that, man.
Yeah, I'm just running it by you.
Yeah, come on, man. I don't need to portray myself as nothing. Like I am who I am. That is what it is, man. Like,
Right.
yeah.
But some others also said that you basically that this could have been an opportunity for you to align yourself with liberal Zionists, but you went a whole other way.
What, that particular moment or just in general?
No, no, just the campaign in general, not that particular moment.
Yeah, I mean, what is that? What does that look like? So, do liberal Zionists support Israel's action in Gaza right now? I mean, if they do, there's no alignment, right? Like I'm not aligning myself with anyone who supports that. So I don't know what
Right,
that looks like, right? I don't.
right.
Yeah.
And what about the party itself? What about the Democratic Party? I mean, did you get any institutional support when this was kind of playing out? Or did you feel like because Israel's such a sensitive issue that they maybe wanted someone who would toe the line more?
I mean, I got endorsements from leadership and some members.
Hmm.
I got money from leadership and many members. I don't know what else they could have done other than that, maybe come to the district campaign with me and all that. There is a world where, could Democratic leadership just shut it down and be like, yo, don't go after Jamal. If you do, you'll have a fight on your hands in the future. Maybe there's a world where that exists. But AIPAC is pretty entrenched in the Democratic Party, providing loads of campaign contributions and other things to the party. So, was the leadership in the party going to do that? I don't know. But I wasn't thinking like, oh, I wish the party would have said or done more. Like that was never my position. We got endorsements, they gave us money. This was a fight we needed to take care on the ground, period. So I don't know.
And from the pro-Palestine side, as well as some have come out to criticize. One of which is your endorsement of Biden, for example. Someone that they see as funding the war. Well, not they see. I mean, as he is funding the war, and what's widely believed, what's widely called a genocide. And another thing is your position on BDS, which you mentioned. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, they both publicly supported BDS, but it's something that I think you initially opposed it, and then there was talk about a meeting with the Democratic Socialists where you said that you were going to come out in support of it. But I don't know, what is your position in all of this? First of all, about endorsing Biden, but also about BDS.
Yeah, again, like in terms of Biden, Biden and Harris, uh, in my opinion, are and would be way better than Trump on domestic issues and on the issue of Israel. I would like to hope that we would have been able to move Harris on that issue. And again, that's hope because the entrenched pro-Israel lobby is really, really strong. But it's not strong in the Democratic Party alone. It's strong in the Republican Party as well. And so, you know, they, there's not going to be a Palestinian state that's completely free or a one state solution where Palestinians have full human rights under Donald Trump. That ain't happening either. So that's why the endorsement of Biden. Yeah, in terms of BDS, I haven't really even talked about it since I think that DSA conversation. I support BDS as a strategy to hold Israel accountable. It's one of the reasons why I went to the encampments at Columbia University because I support the mass college campus movement to force divestment from the state of Israel. They're committing genocide. We need to divest in them. We need to not send them weapons, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, uh, that's what that is.
Just going back to the Biden remark. I mean, some voters, or an argument by some voters, was that, basically Biden and Harris, the Biden administration, they were tried and tested when it comes to Gaza because they spent a whole year and, nothing really changed when it comes to stopping the war on Gaza, as well as providing political cover and financial aid and all of that, and military aid as well. But there was an argument that said, well, you know what? We might as well go to Trump because he may actually have a bigger chance at ending this war. And this is because he may have a bigger chance at exerting real pressure on Israel, which the Democrats haven't really showed any sign of doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, for voters who chose not to vote for Biden because of Gaza, I get it. Like
You get the anger, huh?
yeah, like I'm not even arguing with you. Like I
Yeah.
completely get it. I completely understand. I just shared my position. Benjamin Netanyahu wanted Donald Trump to win, and there's some arguments that he kept this genocide going, this war going, to weaken Democrats as much as possible so that Trump can win. I doubt that this will lead to a swift end to the genocide that's happening there. If it does, happen, excellent. We want it to happen. We've been calling for it for over a year. Then what happens though, right? Like what are we going back to? Like are we gonna have a free Palestine under Trump? I don't think so. I mean, his son-in-law was already talking about Gaza being prime real estate. Jared Kushner, whose father was just pardoned and made ambassador to France. Can't make this stuff up, man. And so yeah, man, it was we always say the better of two evils or something like that. This was like just a horrible choice for Arabs and Muslims and people who care about justice. It was just a horrible choice, and we got what we got. We see where it goes.
How do you see the role of the squad moving forward? I mean, we're in a political climate that's very outrightly rejected progressive politics, aren't we?
No, I
Do you
don't
not
think
see?
so.
I mean, it's shunned it at least.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say that. I mean, the role of the squad continues to be as important as ever, and the role of the squad and the squad themselves, and I'm still a part of it, continues to be as powerful as ever. Um, and I hope and pray that we continue to have the strength and the unity and the support to use our power and leverage our power across the country and around the world. That's what needs to happen, man. And uh, the Democratic Party failed by not embracing more progressive policies that the squad supports,
Mhm.
like universal child care, like affordable housing, like stopping weapons to Israel. These are popular positions that the majority of Americans support. But the Democratic Party shunned these positions. People like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the advisors that surround them, which is really, really key. These ivory tower, consultants, mostly white, of an upper class, advising the president and Kamala on what to do based on, data science. And they have no idea and they're afraid and have no courage as it relates to engaging working class people for real, young people and people of color. And so, who knows how to do all that very well? The squad. So, you know, if the party is smart, it will continue to embrace and engage Ilhan, Rashida, Ayana, Summer, Delia, AOC on the inside, and others, and me and Corey on the outside, if it's smart. especially in this moment. Because I think, to your point, American people have spoken and chose something else because we've been inauthentic in our representation, in our leadership, and ineffective. And so that has to change. I think the squad is central to that change.
And even within you said within the party as well, like within the Democratic Party,
Yeah.
you see them having still a big role.
Now, listen, if the party knows what's good for itself, it would ensure that the squad has a big role. Again, the squad is super popular all across the country. And the people we needed to win this race didn't come out for us, right? And so it's not just the squad as individual leaders. I mean, they're incredible, and I think we're all pretty good if I throw myself in there as pretty good leaders. But it's also the policies, right? We're fighting for Medicare for all. We're fighting for housing as a human right. We're fighting for a jobs guarantee. Again, childcare, pre-K, paid leave, strengthening unions, raising the minimum wage, like all the economic populist stuff that they say cause us to lose. The squad's been champions of this since we've gotten into Congress. And so if the party and we none of us speak, traditional politicians speak. We speak like normal people because we are normal people. And so the party needs the squad more than ever now, in my opinion.
And you say you and Cori Bush from the outside, how do you see your role now within the squad?
Organizing, man. Organizing in our communities, organizing across the country, raising money, building something that could destroy AIPAC forever. That's our role.
Talk to me more about that. How do you envision a role for yourself fighting AIPAC?
I mean, whatever it takes, man. We need to build a strong communication apparatus. That's a big part of it. We need to continue to raise capital. That's a big part of it. We need to work. We need to build coalitions that work within the ecosystem together towards defeating AIPAC. And we need to continue to lend our voice and our experiences to the collective movement towards defeating AIPAC and everything AIPAC represents. This is a very important point because, again, AIPAC is a pro-Israel lobby, and they need to be defeated for that reason. But they also represent white supremacy and everything that comes with that, all of the corporate interests that come with that, all of the continued oppression that's a part of that, all of the fascist behaviors that go with that, because we don't have a democracy when you have special interests like AIPAC doing what they're doing. So all of the above, man. And so that's what I'm going to do. That's what Cori's going to do. And we'll see. We see where it goes.
Well, on that note, we're going to leave it here. Congressman Jamaal Bowman, I really do appreciate your time. I hope the next conversation, I get to see you in person, though. I think better in person.
You're in London, right?
I'm in London right now. But if you're visiting...
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be... I may be in London. We'll see. But yeah, I would love to do it in person. But I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
No, thank you, sir. Appreciate you taking the time. And best of luck to you. And hopefully catch up again soon.
We will. Peace.
Peace.